Hello and welcome to this special edition of The Nexus. Today we're joined by Nigel Farage, the former leader of UKIP, who, perhaps more than anyone else, is responsible for Britain leaving the European Union. He played a prominent role in the 2016 Brexit referendum, which his side won, and then promptly resigned as leader of UKIP, declaring he wanted his life back. Since that historic day, Mr. Farage has been anything but shy and retiring. He soon became a friend and ally to Donald Trump. Later, he set up a new Brexit party, and just last month, he relaunched it as Reform UK to refocus his efforts on resisting what he calls the UK government's woeful response to the coronavirus pandemic, including unspeakably cruel lockdowns. We'll discuss all of that with Nigel in a moment, but first, for any of our viewers who may not be familiar with Mr. Farage, here he is in action.
A friend of mine, a lot of people say one of the most powerful men in Europe, Nigel Farage.
4 years ago, I was honoured to come to America to bring the Brexit message, the message that you can beat the establishment.
We love Europe, we just hate the European Union.
He's very genuine, and he tells it as it is.
Who comes across as a sort of everyday sort of person.
This crusade, for me, has been a quarter of a century.
We want our passports back.
This is how the Nazi Party started in Germany in the 1920s.
You're a fraud, Nigel.
You did nothing to help these people.
We will get our independence back, and we will get our borders back.
The UK has voted to leave the European Union.
Independence Day!
The political class are doing their utmost to stop the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this nation, and I'm absolutely furious about it. We voted to leave, full stop.
So here we are, middle of the English Channel. We're right on the edge of British and French territorial waters. Already there have been 3 migrant boats spotted. The French Navy now are actually escorting boats into British waters. We're being humiliated.
Nigel Farage will relaunch his Brexit party as an anti-lockdown party called Reform UK.
I'm not telling you there isn't a problem with this virus, but the price we're paying is crazy.
Businesses who've struggled already, I think this is just a major blow for them.
The cure is indeed worse than the disease.
What the Prime Minister's trying to do is save our lives.
I've been astonished since the start of this, the extent to which we've allowed our basic liberties and freedom to be taken away by a government who are frankly behaving like totalitarians.
I want to be free. I want to live my life.
Okay, let's talk to the man himself now, Nigel Farage. Welcome to The
Thank
Nexus. You said you wanted your life back, but you haven't spent 5 minutes of the last 4 years out of the public eye.
No, it was a complete failure. I thought, I'd campaigned for 25 years to get a referendum. When this subject wasn't even on the radar of UK media or UK politics. We'd got there, we'd won. I didn't feel there was much more I could do. And yet within a couple of months of saying that, I found myself plunged into the American election, supporting Donald Trump, being attacked by Hillary Clinton. And yes, since
you say
then,
you found yourself, but this was a deliberate choice by yourself. I mean, you don't just sort of find yourself swept up in events, do you?
It was all a complete accident.
Really?
It was. I went to Cleveland for the Republican convention, and ever since I was a kid, I've seen, the first one I saw was Reagan, I think, speaking, and the balloons come down on a ticker tape. I thought, wow, that looks like fun. So I literally went along for a social couple of days, and one thing led to another, and I found myself on the stage with Donald Trump in 2016.
Well, let's start with Donald Trump then.
Yeah.
Your friend, the president, is still refusing to concede that he lost the election. Do you think that he should now concede?
He will concede as soon as every legal avenue has been pursued. Rather like Al Gore 20 years ago. He wasn't happy with what had happened in Florida.
Right.
So Gore continued those cases. I mean, look.
Well, the basis for Trump to do this is that he believes there was massive, widespread fraud, and that could affect the outcome of the election. His Attorney General, Bill Barr, the Justice Department and the FBI, he says, have found no evidence of widespread voter fraud which would affect the outcome of the election.
Yeah, I saw
So I
that.
ask you again, don't you think it is time to concede, not because he's acting unconstitutionally, but because many people say he is now dragging the reputation of the country down with him?
I wouldn't say that, no. As I say, legal challenges with American elections are not as uncommon as perhaps we think right now. What I will say to you is this. I have been the most outspoken critic of postal voting on demand in this country over the last 20 years. Every single time you get widespread mail-in ballots, you get fraud, you get intimidation, you get problems on a huge scale. It does not work. It's why the French don't allow it to happen. They've got a very good system. Now, I said from day one that I had no doubt there'd been ballot harvesting on a gigantic scale. How does that work? It's very simple.
Right, no,
it's very simple.
Yes,
very simple. The postman puts the ballot through the door, and 5 minutes later, someone knocks on the door and comes to collect it. But I said from the start, and I know this because I fought a court case last year over a UK by-election. I'm still convinced I was right, but I lost.
But when his attorney...
And I can't see Trump proving this. So
you can't see him proving it?
No, I can't.
No, absolutely.
No,
which would... You'd think that he would therefore cut his... Have you spoken to him about it? Have you advised him at all about it, how you would handle it?
Look, what he has succeeded in doing is waking up a lot of Americans to the fact that something very odd happened because they gained seats in the House of Representatives. They've held on.
The Republicans.
Republicans.
Yeah.
They've held on to the Senate. They outperformed Hillary Clinton in many, many wide parts, in many, many counties all over America. And yet, in the big Democrat-held cities, it looks like there was a 90% plus vote, and nearly all of it went in Biden's favor.
So, well, this is all very well and good, but the important thing here in a legal challenge, the important thing, is he? He's asked the question. He's had somewhat 30 lawsuits around the country, and they have all been either dismissed or withdrawn, with only one small exception where he got a win on procedural basis. But again, the Supreme Court will not look at it unless it is important enough to change the outcome of the election. You appear to know and acknowledge that it is not going to change the outcome of the election. No. Therefore, what is the point of hanging on? What is the point?
There's a very important long-term point to make sure that America never does this again. That it never does it again.
So it's a sort of a warning that there will be a price to pay.
It's actually a cry for reform. Because if you look at the polling figures, huge numbers of Americans don't say there was widespread fraud and that's why Trump didn't win. But what they do say is they've got serious doubts about the way that certain states conduct elections. So if the long term of this is that America cleans up its act, in terms of elections, he will have achieved something.
Okay, now let's get to the outcome of the election. You actually flew out there to support him.
I did.
As we've seen in that report. Yeah. You apparently wagered £10,000 that he would win.
Yeah.
You were very confident. So what went wrong? What did you and Trump not anticipate?
Well, look, I did put a wager on because the odds were ludicrous. He was 2-1 against in what I knew was an evens contest. I knew that once again the media were wrong. I knew that once again the pollsters were all wrong because I could see myself on the ground, this massive wave of enthusiasm that came for him. What went wrong, I'll tell you bluntly, it was the first debate. He did 2 head-to-head debates against Biden. The first debate, he just wasn't himself at all. Now, whether he already had COVID is something I don't know the answer to. But he performed badly in that debate.
He performed in an aggressive style. Yeah, he was interrupting, badgering. He didn't actually let Joe Biden hang himself with his own poorly made points.
I think it was, in terms of debate strategy going into it, they had it completely wrong. I think what they did was to say, look, if you keep punching Biden, he'll fall to the ground.
Yes.
But Biden didn't fall to the ground, and therefore the whole thing backfired. It was a disaster. When the second debate came, Trump showed himself to be on top of a very wide range of issues and clearly won.
Yes, and he showed a much more disciplined performance. But,
but here's the problem. Here's the problem. You asked me why.
Yes.
By the time the second debate came, 60 million people had already cast their votes. Again, I repeat the point about postal voting. If people are voting a month before an election, you're not having a proper election campaign. So that was the big hurdle that he had to overcome. Then in the last couple of weeks...
But don't you think that the debate is just the tip of the iceberg? What feeds into the debate, the great issue of how he handled the coronavirus? Wouldn't you put that right up there?
Well, of course. I mean, look, do you know what? I was with him on the 29th of February, that leap day that we had this year. He was on cloud nine. Some experts were saying he might win 49 states, rather like Reagan did back in '84. And then coronavirus comes along. Difficult for any world leader to deal with. Of that, there is no question.
How would you have advised him to have handled it differently in retrospect? I know he did some very major decisions, took some very major decisions in shutting down travel from China, and
which was a very good thing to have done, and I wish we'd done the same thing.
Indeed, but it wasn't enough, was it?
No, I think the public perception will be that despite closing the flights down, that he actually underestimated the impact of it during most of the first phase of the virus. I think his analysis at the time of the election is one that I agree with 100%, but maybe people en masse aren't quite yet ready to hear. Namely, that you get to a point with lockdown where the cure becomes worse than the disease.
Which is a message that you're saying and reiterating what Trump is saying. We're going to come back to that because I know you've rebranded your party with that in mind. Let me ask you about Trump's next move, because we have the opportunity to ask somebody who talks with him on a regular basis. People are speculating that he's going to create Trump News Network because, frankly, one of the big things against him was the entire liberal mass media, the mainstream media in the United States.
Yes,
would he go as far as to create his own network?
And even Fox News, he became quite critical.
They called Arizona before CNN did.
But even at the rallies, he was being quite critical of some of the Fox output.
Oh, for sure. After Roger Ailes passed on.
Yeah, things changed.
So would he set up his own news network?
The first and most important point to make about Trump is think of every other American president. They go into office, and after 4 years or 8 years, they've aged about 30 years.
Yes.
You see it with every...
Yes.
This guy looks younger and fitter after 4 years of president than he did the day he walked in to the White House. He's full of vim, of energy.
And what does that mean for his next move then? TV or preparing for another run in 24?
Well, he has a work rate. I mean, I know a lot of people that work for him over this. None of them can live with him. I mean, it's just impossible. He just keeps going. And Donald Trump also, you've got to understand the thing about Trump, and perhaps about America, that Americans do tend to divide people up into winners and losers.
Yeah.
It's a very American way of looking at it.
There's not much of a safety net out there.
And Trump sees himself as a winner and wants to be seen as a winner. And I can't see anybody else in the Republican Party that can mobilize Latino support, black support, blue-collar support in the way that Trump has managed. And my view is that he will run again in 2024, that he will start the campaign for the midterms very, very quickly. And given that he doesn't have any executive office, there's nothing to stop him starting TrumpTV or something like that.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
You're expecting Joe Biden. Most people are now expecting Joe Biden to take over. You've been quite disparaging about him.
Well, no.
Perhaps justifiably so in your opinion, but you've said he's hiding away in his basement and so on.
He's an old duffer, isn't he?
And he doesn't know where he is.
Look, he's an old duffer. He can barely string a sentence together.
You're going to be completely frozen out by his administration, unlike Trump's administration.
Yes.
You're going to have to wait at least another 4 years.
I get that. I get that.
But what is that going to do to Britain
and
Brexit?
Okay, number one, I don't think he's fit for office. And I don't think many other people think, in truth, that he's fit for office.
Only 80 million.
Look, if they all think Joe Biden is going to be a good, strong president, they're in for a big shock very, very quickly. I mean, goodness me, he's not even in office and he's tripped over his dog and broken his foot. I mean, it's not exactly a great start, is it? My problem with Biden is this. Biden is a globalist. Biden stands for all the things that I have fought against. Biden loves the European Union, loves this big, undemocratic globalist project, thinks Brexit is a disaster.
It's going to be a very crucial week for that process. The deadline for a UK-EU trade deal is December the 31st, a couple of weeks away now. The EU's lead negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been meeting with his UK counterpart, David Frost, here in London. And if there's no deal, the UK crashes out on World Trade Organization terms. Do you think there will be a deal in time?
It doesn't crash out. It leaves the oppressive single market customs union.
I knew you'd pick up on that
and a
word.
lot of things that have held us back.
It leaves abruptly and goes to WTO
but this is all
terms.
the mainstream media narrative, you see, isn't it? This is all the narrative, is that anything to do with Brexit is put in negative terms. Look, I coined a phrase about 10 days before that referendum in 2016, which was no deal is better than a bad deal.
Right.
All right? Now, if we can get a good deal, that's fantastic. But I'm not sure that we can. And in the last 48 hours, we've seen that the UK, or at least Barnier claims that the UK has agreed to stay within the European Union's human rights regime.
Right.
Agreed to stay within the European Court of Human Rights, which is separate to the EU, but very closely allied to it. So if we're making concessions like that, I wonder how many more concessions Boris will make.
That's a very good point. So one writer in the left-wing Guardian newspaper predicts that Boris Johnson will get a deal,
yes,
but it will be a betrayal of the Brexiteers. Is that what you're anticipating?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Okay, so so you just said what betrayal looks like. There may be other matters, including fishing, at stake here. If there is a betrayal, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, clearly, if we finish up with a situation where many of the laws that affect our businesses, our industries, and our ability to trade around the world are still being effectively decided in Brussels because we've agreed to align ourselves to them, then I'm afraid it's ongoing business. Although
meaning
that we'll have to campaign for these things to be changed over the course of the next few years.
Use your Brexit party, which you've now rebranded. Would you start that up again and use it for leverage against Boris Johnson?
Yes, I think we'd have to.
How would that work?
It's not going to be easy. Because the truth of it is that the country has suffered terribly from Brexhaustion. We've just had enough of it. We want to move on.
Yeah.
So I hope and pray that I'm wrong. I hope and pray that Boris does get a good sound deal for the United Kingdom. But I think the mood music now looks like, because of the American election, Boris does not want to be seen stuck in the mid-Atlantic.
What is your greatest leverage over Boris Johnson or any government with the Brexit party? Because you've done phenomenally well at the European level. You got by far the most votes.
We win them,
by miles. But at the UK level, in the general election, you didn't win any seats in 2019.
I mean, look at 2015.
So what I'm saying, where's the leverage on the government?
I mean, look at 2015. I mean, nobody in British history has ever got as many votes for so little reward under this electoral system.
Just one seat, wasn't it?
Yeah, one seat
and
for 4 million votes.
4 million votes, right.
Yeah, more votes than the SNP, the Lib Dems, Plaid, all added up together. So it is difficult.
But that is the system. That's the first past the post system.
And that's why I want to reform things.
The best thing you can do,
that's why Reform UK comes. And look, the psychological effect of a Brexit reform party exposing to the public that Boris has broken his word is something that would concentrate minds.
You could take a few points off of the Conservative Party.
Maybe quite a lot.
Which would hurt them.
Yeah.
You may end up with Labour. I read in an article, possibly The Spectator, they said that you'd be willing to do something like that, to actually even go as far as to reverse Brexit if you didn't get the dream Brexit that you've been hoping for and campaigning for years.
No. Look, the big thing is we've left the European Union, all right? I don't like this new treaty that I suspect we're going to be signed up to by the end of this month, and we'll have to campaign and fight for change. But the big hurdle has been overcome, and there is no going back. The big historic change has happened.
There's no going back? I mean, I heard you recently say that potentially, because of the reasonable closeness of the referendum, you might concede the need to have one within, after 10 years, 2029.
Oh, I mean, the argument was that we were told that this was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, all right? So if in a generation's time, people wish to revisit the issue, fine. But look, just have a look at what's going on inside the European Union. Poland and Hungary vetoing the budget. East to west, the EU split. North to south, economically, the EU split.
What if the deal leaves Britain worse off economically, though? The Office for Budget Responsibility has already forecast that Brexit will reduce the UK's GDP by 4%, even with a free trade deal.
We'll all be living in caves.
And a further 2% if there's no deal. So the Office for Budget Responsibility can't trust them.
Do you know, I've been through all of this.
I know.
I mean, in the run-up to the 2016 referendum, you would have thought that a Brexit vote would lead to us, having sort of the GDP of the Congo or something. Yeah, and it's done none of those things.
It didn't happen.
It's done none of those things. And interesting, isn't it? Just this morning, for right or wrong, just this morning, Matt Hancock has said that we are the first country in the world to approve the Pfizer vaccine, and we will start administering it next week. Now, you may think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the point Hancock made is we're only able to do that now we've left the European Union.
That's the UK Health Secretary.
So we're,
so
we're free. Yeah. So people say to me, economically, Nigel, are we going to be worse off or better off?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what we are going to be, freer.
Okay. Now, it's an interesting point
you
should raise.
And you can't put a price on that.
There's an interesting point you should raise from Matt Hancock that the UK has now approved the, the vaccine.
Yeah.
Because that should lead to fewer, if perhaps no need for a lockdown. And if your party, Reform UK, has been designed and relaunched in order to fight what you would call those oppressive lockdowns, that whole ambition could be academic.
The point about Reform UK is that I was talking about it a year ago. We have an electoral system that shuts out millions of voters, as we just explained a moment ago. We have a House of Lords, which is just stuffed full of the mates of the last 4 prime ministers. I mean, on a level that you can't even believe. We too have postal voting problems and fraud problems within our system. We've seen during the last 8 months how inefficient our quangos are, how badly our government spends money.
So it's a far broader ambition than just fighting lockdowns and the coronavirus.
Lockdown and the way those decisions have been taken is a symptom of a much bigger problem in terms of the way we're governed. So the point about Reform UK, the point about what I'm arguing for, this is a genuine radical politics that says we need to bring the United Kingdom into the 21st century, have a system that actually works.
But we're running out of time. I want to get to one of the big issues of Brexit, perhaps the biggest issue, which is illegal immigration and legal immigration. This summer and also this spring, you spent a great deal of time down on the southeast coast. You were going out on a boat. You were looking and finding illegal immigrants coming onto British shores. Why did you feel the need to do that?
Because the media weren't reporting it. Quite simple. You know, it was not being reported. It was not being discussed in any way at all. And you know, Brexit would never have happened if it wasn't for the argument that part of being a nation state is the ability to control your borders and to choose who comes in to live, work, and settle in your country. And we'd had this open door policy with the European Union, which really brought the debate to a head. We know that of those that come illegally to Britain, over 80% would never, ever qualify for asylum. They don't pass the criteria that we've ever used for qualifying for asylum. We know it is putting a massive cost onto the British taxpayer, and that's just not a financial cost, there is a social cost to this as well. So I went out to do it, to try and expose the story, and I think I succeeded in doing that.
Yes, you did. Hundreds of thousands of people have been watching your videos on your YouTube channel, on Facebook and elsewhere. Some people, as always with you, have congratulated you, have thanked you, and there have been others who are absolutely certain this proves only one thing, their original impression of you, which is that you have racist motivations, xenophobic motivations. What would you say to that?
It's the way to just chuck, just throw abuse in the hope that then you haven't got to have a debate. You know, I would say to anyone that's ever said that to me, do you think we should unconditionally open our borders up to every poor country in the world? Are you not concerned that ISIS are using this route in some few, but still very importantly, cases to put terrorists into the country? I mean, doesn't it make sense to have a proper refugee policy, which, by the way, Britain's done better over the centuries than almost any other country in the world?
Why do you think it is? It's strange, but you do resonate with, I can't quantify the amount, but you do resonate with a portion of the British public who think that you are the only person to speak up for them, and that the mainstream media, the government, academia, and so on, are in some cahoots in order to deny what to them is self-evident.
Well, yes.
Do you think that there is some greater mission here?
It's London v. the rest. I mean, that's what it is. You know, we have this big, dominant capital city here in London, and the people that work in politics, work in media, work in big business, work in the civil service, they're all interchangeable. You know, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, leaves, becomes the editor of the Evening Standard. You know, people move around.
It is revolving doors, sure.
Yeah, and it's this very, very narrow social set. that run everything in this country.
Then why is it?
And get outside, get outside of London and you find completely different attitudes.
And almost a final question for you, Nigel.
Yes.
Why is it then that the British people have not chosen your party to represent them in the national parliament? Why is it that you've tried 7 times to become an MP and they've rejected you 7 times?
I'm the only political leader in the history of the United Kingdom that has won 2 national elections leading 2 different parties, which I did with UKIP in the 2014 European elections.
Do you still have that ambition to get into Westminster?
And politics for me was never about ambition to sit in parliaments or have titles, even though I did 20 years in Brussels in the European Parliament. I'm a businessman. I came into politics because I felt the entire leadership of our country was taking us in the wrong direction, taking us down a route where we wouldn't just lose sovereignty, but we'd lose our place in the world and our ability to be the global player that we always have been and we always should be. I came into this with a passion to change things, and I hope I have changed things.
Well, you have certainly changed things. It is debatable whether it is for the better or not, as always, with you, Nigel. Nigel Farage, thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching as well. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do have a look at our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.